December 3, 1984, midnight in the Indian city of Bhopal. Families were asleep, children were dreaming, and the city was silent. But in just a few minutes, a poisonous cloud would cover the sky and turn Bhopal into the world's deadliest industrial disaster. Welcome to my channel. This is the story of the Bhopal Gas Tragedy. December 1984, Bhopal was a normal Indian city. It was the capital of the state of Madhya Pradesh. Around 1 million people lived there, most of them poor, but all of them hopeful for a better future. There was a famous lake in the city center. It was surrounded by parks and gardens. In the evenings, young lovers would stroll along the lake. On those nights, the air was filled with music and laughter, and life in Bhopal seemed beautiful. But there was a dark secret beneath the surface. On the outskirts of the city stood a huge pesticide factory. It was owned by a multi-billion-dollar American company called Union Carbide, and inside this factory, 40 tons of a deadly chemical were stored. It was called methyl isocyanate. You can call it Mike. Just a small amount of this gas could kill a person. And here, 40 tons of this poison lay stored in a leaky storage tank. Tonight, however, no one would sleep. A few hours later, disaster would strike. At around 12:30 a.m., water leaked from a pipe into the Mike storage tank. Scientists are not sure what caused the leak. Perhaps it was faulty wiring, perhaps human error. All we know is that when water mixed with the Mike, a chemical reaction occurred. The water reacted with the gas. The pressure inside the tank started building up. For some reason, the alarm system failed to detect this. The workers were asleep and no one knew about the danger. The pressure continued to rise, minute after minute, second after second. Then, at around 12:45 a.m., the tank burst. Imagine this scene for a moment. It's the middle of the night. People are sleeping in their homes. Suddenly, the walls shake. People run out of their houses in panic. They have no idea what has happened. The next thing they know, they can't breathe anymore. A large amount of Mike gas had leaked from the factory. It was spreading across the city like wildfire. Within minutes, it reached several parts of Bhopal. People were dying as they breathed in the gas. The poison settled in their lungs, burning their insides. It made their skin feel itchy. Their eyes started watering. But most of them didn't realize that this gas was killing them. The wind was blowing fast that night. It carried the Mike gas over long distances. Most of the city was affected. Those who survived the gas leak fell victim to lung disease and cancer later. The poison had entered their bodies and slowly started killing them. By the next morning, more than 3,000 people had died. So how did this happen? How did the world's deadliest industrial disaster occur? To answer this question, investigations were launched. But first, let's take a look at the company behind this. The Union Carbide Corporation was an American company. It was founded in 1917. By the year 1984, it was a multi-billion-dollar corporation. It specialized in producing chemicals. These chemicals were used to make pesticides and plastics. But the company had a very bad reputation. Workers at its factories complained of bad working conditions and racism. But no one paid attention to these complaints. Carbide was far more concerned with profits than worker safety. And that's why it decided to build its factory right next to a residential neighborhood. If an accident happened, the nearby families would be the first to die. And in 1984, that's exactly what happened. When investigators examined the factory, they found shocking lapses in safety systems. First of all, the plant was extremely old. Its pipes had rusted and were leaking. Secondly, there was no proper ventilation system. The Mike gas had nowhere to escape. Lastly, there were no sensors to detect gas leaks. If such a system had been in place, perhaps the lives of many could have been saved. Finally, the report concluded that Carbide had violated almost every possible safety rule, but none of this mattered until the gas leaked. Carbide was more interested in profits than safety measures. And now the company was being held responsible for the deaths of thousands of people. The company tried to avoid blame. They said the leak was an accident. But an official inquiry rejected this claim. The Bhopal gas tragedy was not an accident, it said. It was criminal negligence. But who was responsible for this negligence? A series of lawsuits revealed the shocking truth. Time and again, employees had warned their bosses about the dangers of storing Mike. The gas was highly reactive and dangerous. It could leak, it could explode, but Carbide ignored these warnings. As always, they were more interested in profits than safety. In fact, they had sabotaged safety systems in the plant. For example, The alarm system was designed to alert workers about gas leaks, but Carbide removed the connecting wires so that it didn't go off. If the alarm had sounded that night, maybe people could have been evacuated in time, but no one knew about the danger. And by the time the sun rose, thousands of people had already died. Warren Anderson, the CEO of Carbide, was charged with culpable homicide. He could have easily avoided the tragedy, but he never took any action. He could have saved the lives of thousands of people, but he chose not to. Instead, he preferred profits to human lives, and so the CEO of the world's deadliest company became the world's most wanted man. An arrest warrant was issued against him, but he never returned to Bhopal. He enjoyed his life, traveling around the world and living in luxury hotels. Meanwhile, the survivors of Bhopal struggled to survive. On December, hundreds of thousands of people marched onto the streets. They demanded justice. They wanted compensation for their losses. But the government was not willing to listen. They tried to suppress the protests. They arrested activists and imposed curfews. But the people of Bhopal were not giving up. They knew that the government was hand in glove with the Carbide officials. So they started approaching courts. But the judicial process was slow, and the Carbide officials were influential. They could get away with this. But two journalists played an important role. Their names were Seymour Hersh and Janewant Raju. They exposed how Carbide was trying to bribe officials and influenced the investigation. When people around the world learned about this, they started demanding punishment for the guilty. Global campaigns were launched. People marched onto the streets of London, New York, and Paris. They raised slogans against Carbide and the US government. Finally, the government had no option but to crack down on the company. Warren Anderson was arrested. But that was little consolation for the people of Bhopal. By then, the damage had already been done. Thousands of people had died. Hundreds of thousands more were suffering from lifelong diseases. Nothing could bring them back. Nothing could undo what had happened. Yet somehow, life went on in Bhopal. People rebuilt their lives. Families struggled to survive. Shopkeepers reopened their stores. Schools and colleges resumed classes. But the wound in their hearts never healed. Today, Bhopal is called the Hiroshima of the chemical industry. Even today, survivors struggle for justice. And even today, the world remembers this as the worst industrial disaster in history. Now tell me, what do you think? How could such a tragedy be prevented? And do you think justice was served in this case? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'm the host. This has been the story of the Bhopal Gas Tragedy. If you like our content, do give us a thumbs up and subscribe for more updates.